What is love? Baby, don't hurt me. Don't hurt me anymore. Damn, not this. I slowly opened my eyes, wondering for the thousandth time why I chose that song as my alarm clock. And I answered, because I thought it was funny, because I thought it would cheer up Julie, my wife. At the first morning, I let it play until she finally got up and demanded an explanation as to why I didn't turn off the alarm clock. Bingo! That was my cue. With my eyes closed, I started shaking my head slowly, then faster. Soon I was doing the full Night at Roxbury dance, really just head bobbing with added stench. This elicited the reaction I was looking for. She slapped my hand and made a little snorting sound, trying not to laugh. It was Monday. Today was Friday, and there was no chance of a repeat. By now, I was thoroughly tired of this song. What is Love by Hathaway. I wished like hell I could change it. I reached over and turned off the sound on my phone, then sat down. The atmosphere was a little different than it had been on Monday. I was in the guest room. Julie said she had a sore throat and might be sick with something. It's funny how when I'm sick, they send me to the guest room. And when she's sick, they send me to the guest room. I briefly considered going to work, but immediately dismissed the thought. It was 5 in the morning. Julie would sleep until 6:30 before she started her day. I had to get up earlier because I took the train to New York every morning. Julie worked at the local hospital here in Trenton as a clerk in the billing department. Since I didn't have the slightest desire to do anything, I decided to have a little fun today. I got up and put on shorts and a t-shirt, walking quietly into our bedroom so as not to wake Julie. I looked at my shoes and opted for the fuzzy slippers by the bed. Comfort today. I got into my 10-year-old Ford Taurus and drove through our sleepy, middle-class neighborhood. I drove past the train station where I usually parked and drove to the Big Apple. I had a little time to kill, so I headed to the IHOP. I couldn't decide what I wanted, repeatedly ordering everything on the menu. When the waitress came over, I still didn't know what I wanted, so I just said to hell with it. "Are you ready to order, sir? Do you need a few more minutes?" A slightly haggard middle-aged woman asked. "Give me one of everything." "Sir?" "One of everything on the breakfast menu. Dishes, side dishes, drinks, everything." Um, I could see she was worried that I was just messing with her, probably preparing to run away. So I said, "Here's my credit card. Go ahead and call me. Add a 50% tip for yourself and send the food as it's prepared." Now she was smiling. "Yes, sir. Would you like to move to a larger table? You'll need the space." "Good idea, Flo." Her name tag said Janet, but she didn't bother to correct me. I could have called her Fun Bags, and she would have just smiled and said, "Yes, sir." She led me over to a table for 10 in the center of the restaurant, practically bowing and scraping like a feudal villain in front of her master. She even made a motion as if she was going to hold a chair for me, but stopped, blushing embarrassedly. I smiled at how happy she looked. Perhaps I had made her weak. The restaurant was about half full, and there were more and more people as breakfast began. I was probably a sight to behold, sitting alone at a table for 10 with plates covering it from end to end. Some were partially stacked on top of each other. There were a lot of strange looks at me, and I noticed that many of the younger diners were taking pictures of me. I wondered how much attention I was paying to social media. Around 8 guys, the place was full, and one man with a family of 6 was waiting for a table to become available. He looked at me and was angry that I was taking up so much space. He kept gesturing angrily while talking to the waitress, so I slowed down. I hardly ate anything at all. I'd been surfing the web on my phone, occasionally reaching out with my fork to accidentally prick something. Now I put my phone away and began methodically going from plate to plate, taking one bite from each. Occasionally, I closed my eyes in exaggerated delight, but mostly I maintained constant eye contact with angry Dad. His face turned even redder, and my wife went over to put a forbidding hand on his arm. He shook it off and took a step in my direction. I immediately jumped up. My chair flew backwards with a crash. I spread my arms wide and shouted at him, "You want to get away, big guy? Come to me, brother. That's my IHOP. All your pancakes belong to me." You could hear a pin drop. The entire restaurant stared at me with wide-eyed wonderment. Some of the young men were filming me on their phones. With the corner of my eye, I scanned my tables. Without taking my eyes off my angry father, I reached down and grabbed a handful of blueberry pancakes with vanilla cream. I took a huge bite, smearing it all over my face. I raised my hand over the table and let go of the pancake. Then I walked out the door. Angry Dad's son gave me a thumbs up when his dad wasn't looking. Once in the parking lot, I regretted not grabbing a napkin on my way out, but that would have ruined the whole effect. I wiped my hand on my shirt that was lying on the back seat of the car and drove off. Not for the first time, I thought that my situation could be incredibly freeing. The feeling that my behavior was becoming increasingly unstable never left me. Not so long ago, the very thought of yelling at a stranger in public would have been unthinkable. It's some Jerry Springer shit. But when you're completely convinced that your actions don't matter, that you won't leave any mark on the world, you can start to lose your mind. More on that later. It was only 8:30 and I still had a couple hours left. I thought about going to the movies, but I had already seen them all. There was a mall nearby and I knew there was going to be a flash mob there at 9:15. I could go see it, maybe try to join in. No. The flash mob was mostly teenagers leaving for the summer, and I was feeling particularly old today at my 27th birthday. So what did I do? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. I just sat in the car, not even listening to the radio, just passing out. At 11:30, I snapped out of it and drove to Home Depot. I bought the longest garden hose they had, as well as the nozzle that I knew from experience gave the best spray. It was basically a long cone that focused the water into a narrow beam. It didn't have a shutoff valve, so I would have to crimp the hose to stop the water flow. I drove home, arriving a little after 12:15 p.m. Perfect. As I suspected, Julie's Honda and a red Porsche Cayenne, which I knew belonged to Dr. Richard Peters, were parked in the driveway. Dick Peters is a fitting name. I just call him Dr. Dick. I parked behind the Porsche and ran a hose to the water spigot on the front of the house. Before turning on the water, I went into the garage. Some banging and grinding could be heard on the second floor, but I knew they wouldn't hear me. I took the pliers and carefully crimped the end of the metal nozzle until it was less than half its original size. Then I went back outside, attached it to the hose, and turned the water on full blast. The 100-foot hose was more than long enough to reach up the stairs to our bedroom door. On the way, I grabbed a small footrest from the kitchen that Julie used to reach the top shelves. I set it right in front of the door, looking back at the wall on the other side of the hallway to make sure it was in the right place. This was the most delicate part of the plan. Then I stood behind her with the corrugated hose and slowly opened the door. It didn't take long to see the sight. I had already watched the whole thing and didn't want to watch anymore, so I decided to get the party started right away. They didn't realize I was there until I put the hose into action. With this nozzle, with my modifications, from 10 feet away, I'll tell you, it stung like a son of a bitch. He fell off the bed on the side of the door, and as soon as he was free, I got a great beaver shot of my wife. At this point, she was just wet and confused. The confusion turned to panic when she pulled out an industrial-strength turbo sprinkler. She shrieked and rolled off the other side of the bed with a clatter. By this time, Dr. Dick had already gotten up and assessed the situation. I think his first impulse was to tell me to calm down. Eventually, Dr. Dick got his breathing under control and ran at me at full speed with his arms spread out. His mouth and eyes were tightly closed. He was going to pounce on me right in the teeth and bring me down. And if I hadn't known it was coming, it would have worked. I kept the spray on his face so he wouldn't open his eyes, while simultaneously backing away until I was against the doorway. That's where the stepladder came in handy. Dr. Dick flew at full speed through the doorway and stumbled over a stool and down the corridor. There he crashed right into the masonry. That's why the location of the stool and where I was standing was so important. The beams in the wall are 16 inches apart. Instead of tapping himself 2x4, Dr. Dick lay stunned in the hallway and half in the upstairs bathroom, wedged between two wall beams. It seemed to have knocked him out. I swiped the hose to stop the water. I moved over and put my foot on Dr. Dick's lower back to hold him in place. My dear wife, sensing a lull in the action, decided to remedy the situation a bit. "Sam, I'm so sorry. I don't know what to say." I have to hand it to her. We'd talked about it many times and she'd never tried to downplay her cheating, never blamed it on me, never said it was the first time or it didn't mean anything or it was just sex. And while she wasn't outspoken and honest, she didn't lie. But tonight I wasn't in the mood to go down that old path. She approached slowly, wrapped in plaid, one hand at chest level, the other holding her bottom so she wouldn't trip. She looked like warmed over death, drenched, crying, and mumbling. Whatever she was saying was just white noise to me. I was more interested in how close she got to me and Dr. Dick. Baby, please talk to me. Tell me there's something I can do. Tell me I didn't mess everything up. I didn't say anything. Dr. Dick was quiet as a mouse, probably hoping I'd forgotten about him. The chance was slim. I waited until she had moved back about 3 steps. The next part required precise timing. Step 1. When she was mid-step, I let the water run. She instinctively clamped her mouth with both hands and lost the plaid, which got tangled in her legs. As she fell, I turned my attention to Dr. Dick. Step 2. Wait 8 seconds. Step 3. Let go. I jumped back sharply, letting go of Julie's hair and hose. Dr. Peters clutched the hose tightly, trying to avoid the inevitable. But what goes in, comes out. Julie, who was 4 feet away at eye level, had no need to guess. She really shouldn't have opened her mouth. I watched Julie spit up and Dr. Dick sob quietly for a few seconds. And then I walked out. I was halfway to my car when I stopped. My little revenge was over, and I suddenly felt overwhelmed. Getting into my car seemed like a monstrous task, and deciding where to go next seemed even more so. There was nowhere to go, nothing to do. None of it meant anything. I was a nobody. Instead of getting in the car, I walked 3 houses down to my neighbor Ted's house. I used the key he kept in the fake rock under his window. I went upstairs to his bedroom, to his bedside table, opened it, took out the Glock 17 he kept there, put it in his mouth, pulled the trigger. Friday, July 15th, 2016. Day 1. Day 1 was a normal day. I got up at 5 a.m., changed into the suit I had prepared the night before, and headed to New York City. I headed to my office on Wall Street, more specifically to my cubicle. I worked as an analyst at Broadwell and Marks. My job was to research companies and financial products. I would try to identify winners and losers, then pass my findings to a junior associate who would review my work as well as the work of a bunch of other analysts. The junior associate would then make his recommendations to the senior associate who would make buy or sell decisions. The senior associate, of course, attributed any gains to his brilliance and blamed any losses on his subordinate's faulty analysis. When you say you work on Wall Street, people assume you're living the dream, climbing the Golden Mountain. I was languishing in the Copper foothills. I got the job right after I graduated from Rutgers at 21 with a degree in finance. The degree got me in the door, but in the 6 years since then, I haven't gotten very far. Advancing on Wall Street depends as much on who you know as on what you know. While I readily admit that I am not a rainmaker, I have seen less qualified, less talented men and women overtake me on the corporate ladder. Nevertheless, I was making a good salary. My career may have been building slower than I would have liked, but I believed I would eventually make it to the top of the mountain. I just hoped I would still be young enough to enjoy the view. I spent a busy day going over financial documents and then headed home a little after 6. I walked in the door and delightful smells wafted from the kitchen. To avoid commuting several hours each day, Julie left for work later and came home earlier. She worked at the hospital but was not a medical professional, so she had regular hours. Julie cooked dinner in the evenings, and I tried to catch up on weekends unless I had to work overtime, which happened quite often. Tonight was breakfast for dinner. There's nothing like the smell of bacon. Yum. What is that heavenly smell? Scrambled eggs and bacon are ready, fries are in the oven. I put the toaster on when I heard you pull up. I wasn't talking about food, I replied, nuzzling against her neck and breathing deeply. She flinched slightly. Julie always melts when you play with her neck. I loved breathing gently on the back of her neck and tracing my way down it, barely touching the fine, almost invisible hairs with my lips. Her head would involuntarily fall back and her mouth would open slightly, letting out uncontrollable sighs and shivers. While the smell of bacon might be hard to beat, nothing could compare to the clean, sweet scent of a woman. Julie had that seemingly effortless ability that women have, to always smell good. Of course, women would say that it's not easy at all. It takes a lot of work. I think I can say on behalf of my male colleagues that we really appreciate it. Oh my God! Stop it, Sam. Save it for later. I'm hungry. Me too. I moved on to kissing her neck, but now added light nibbles. I teased Julie about her vampire fetish. Screw it, we can heat up the food later, she said, turning to shower me with scalding kisses. But now it was my turn to hit the brakes. No, you're right. You've put so much effort into cooking, we shouldn't let it go to waste. I quickly walked back to the cupboard and pulled out a couple of plates. Julie was bursting with indignation. You'll get it later, asshole. Don't wear your mouth out or it's already strained. I take it your sore throat is gone? False alarm, you're back in our bed tonight where you belong. After dinner, we didn't run to bed. We settled on the couch and watched TV. Julie loves a show called Trauma. It purports to be a serious medical drama set in a trauma center. Julie said that while everything in the show is greatly exaggerated, there is some truth to the idea that hospitals are meat markets. Apparently, in the office where she worked, there was constant discussion about who was sleeping with whom. Hearing about promiscuity in her workplace was not pleasant for me, but I didn't blame my wife for the actions of her less moral coworkers. I worked on Wall Street surrounded by so-called alpha males who wouldn't think twice about cheating on their wives and girlfriends. Some days there were so many pampered women gathered in the lobby of our 30-story office waiting for a lunch date that it was like, the day you take a mistress to work. The arrogance of some of them was astounding. Around 10 p.m. we went through our nightly rituals. Lock up, turn off the lights. We got busy, and I fell asleep with a smile on my face. Honestly, I've forgotten more than I remember about that first day. At the time, it was just an ordinary weekday in the life of a happily married man. Interestingly enough, before I went to bed, I changed my alarm clock to one of my phone's standard alarms. I had been waking up to Hadaway for a week, and I was tired of it. Friday, July 15th, 2016, Day 2. What the hell? I don't like mornings. Once I get moving, I'm fine, but getting out of bed is labor, and I'm usually not at my best before I have coffee. This morning, my usual sleepiness was quickly turning to complete bewilderment. Why was I in the guest room? Hadn't I changed my alarm clock? Why did my alarm clock go off on a Saturday when I didn't have to work? Have you ever had a very realistic dream where you were just going through a normal day? You get up, go to school, or go to work. And then, at some point during the day, you just wake up? That was my first thought, although I've never had that kind of sleep throughout the day. And usually at least part of my sleep was spent losing my clothes in public. Could this be the one? It was so realistic. Did I really dream the whole day? I must have. On a chair in the guest room lay the suit I'd laid out Thursday night. Last night, I walked over to it. Same suit, same shirt, same tie. I picked up the shirt and sniffed it. It was definitely unworn. The suit was unmarked, still in the cleaning package. Weird. I shrugged and got dressed. At this point, I was just pissed off that I dreamed I'd been working 9 hours. My subconscious must be some kind of asshole. At least it could have assigned me an office. Maybe let my new boss, Scarlett Johansson, harass me. The drive to New Jersey Transit didn't bode well. I've driven it so many times that it would be odd if I had a sense of déjà vu. The train, on the other hand, was another matter. I entered the third car and sat on the east side, out of habit. There was no superstition in that. The third car stopped in front of the newsstand where I picked up my morning paper. The Wall Street Journal, of course. I just walked in and sat in the first available seat in sight. The trouble started at the first stop after Trenton. A young blonde woman entered the rail car and sat next to me. The problem was that I remembered her from my dream. She was a typical young passenger, wearing casual clothes, carrying a backpack, texting and listening to headphones. She wasn't particularly memorable in any way, except that she had her hair up in a ponytail, exposing her earlobes, which were stretched wide enough to fit a tube of toilet paper in them. Not that they actually contained empty rolls of Charmin, of course. There were peculiar rings in the ears. I distinctly remembered her from last night's dream. I remembered wondering if her ears looked like boiled spaghetti without the rings. I sat there as if in a fog. Could it really be the same girl? It had to be. But how? I certainly couldn't ask her, even if I wasn't afraid right now that she might spit on me. Were you in my dream last night? No way. Had it been a dream? Maybe I'd gotten the days mixed up? Maybe yesterday was Thursday? But the clothes. I was driving myself crazy, so I decided to distract myself with a ritual. Every day on my way to work, I read a magazine. And that solved everything. It was the one. Damn it. Paper. My imagination isn't that good. I didn't dream that I'd read every article in the whole damn paper. I flipped through it feverishly, not believing my eyes. I recognized every article. I read them. They may not have all made an impression at that moment, but there was no way I could read that newspaper and not be absolutely sure I had read it the day before. The rest of that day remained a blur. I'm pretty sure I went to work. I spent the rest of the day as a zombie, or maybe it would be more accurate to say that. I walked through it like a chihuahua, eyes wide open and trembling slightly. Every 15 minutes, another deja vu occurred. I couldn't stop remembering the events that were happening right in front of me. I really felt like I was going crazy. Friday, July 15th, 2016. Day 3. I woke up abruptly, saw that I was in the guest bedroom again, and screamed. It wasn't a girly scream. It was very manly. Macho, even. In fact, it was more like a lion's roar. My wife came running in. "Did you hear that? It sounded like a woman screaming." She ran over to the window, looking around the backyard for a young woman who had been killed. Uh, it was me. "What, are you hurt? Are you hurt?" No, I think I'm losing my mind, Julie," I whispered. "What do you mean? You're scaring me, baby." I hesitated for a second before answering. If I was going to share with anyone, it was my wife, but saying it out loud was a serious step. I thought I might go into a real psychosis. I didn't want to scare my wife. Or worse, have her think I was crazy. I keep reliving the same day. For the third day in a row now, I woke up here in the guest room on July 15th. Yesterday, I thought I was just confused, but now I know it's really happening. A pained expression appeared on Julie's face. Her natural inclination to support the man she loved was fighting skepticism. I could tell she didn't believe me. I couldn't blame her. I wouldn't believe her either. How could I prove it to her? "Baby," she said, "maybe it's the stress. Maybe you should take the day off and rest. Are you sure you didn't have a nightmare last night? You're still in bed. It looks like you just woke up and screamed." I thought about something. "Go get dressed. I'll prove it to you. I've already read today's paper twice. Come with me to the corner store and you'll see." I had to hand it to her. She was usually still in bed. She didn't argue, just went and got dressed. She was awakened from her sleep by her husband screaming and spouting madness, and she handled it like a champ. She saw that I was very upset and wanted to help in any way she could. God, I loved her. I felt so much calmer knowing Julie was by my side. We drove to the nearest gas station and bought a copy of the magazine. We got home and sat down at the kitchen table before getting down to business. As it turned out, my confidence was misplaced. My bright idea was that Julie would pick an article at random, and I would give her details I couldn't have known without reading it. I may have reread the paper twice in the last couple days, but I hadn't memorized it by heart. When Julie picked out an article, I could usually summarize what it was about and cite some statistic or mention a name. But not always. I didn't expect to be asked later. There were a few columns that Julie had to practically read out to me before I memorized them. Worse, since most of the articles were financial news, Julie brought up the fact that I might just know some of the content. If the article was about Apple's second quarter earnings, I didn't need to know in advance to guess that it prominently featured sales figures for the new iPhone. And if I could cite specific sales figures and stock projections, well, I used to work on Wall Street. Damn, that's embarrassing. Well, that was a little lame, but honestly, you know a lot more than I thought you did. I can see that this is really getting to you. I'll call Susan and take the day off. I don't think you should be alone. Susan was the head of the billing department at Julie's hospital. I knew it wouldn't be hard to get time off. Julie was probably the most honest and conscientious person I had ever met. I never heard her tell a lie. Her employers absolutely adored her. Not that she had many. Her bosses fought to keep her. While I was climbing the corporate ladder with a snail's pace, Julie was the assistant director of billing at St. Gertrude's Hospital. The hospital administration was trying to find a place to promote her until she fell into the hands of a corporate headhunter. She returned to the kitchen where I sat dejectedly. "Come on, Sam," she said, leading me into the living room and sitting me down on the couch. I lay down with my head in her lap, and she gently stroked my hair. I just closed my eyes and tried to clear my head. In the kitchen, I racked my brain trying to find some way to prove what was going on. But nothing was coming up. If I could take it with me to work, maybe. But nothing really memorable that I could have predicted in advance was happening. And while she was very understanding, asking her to take the train to New York just to entertain my musings would have been too much. We spent the day chatting, trying to keep things light. I think Julie was hoping that I would come out of my breakdown if she could distract me from my thoughts and calm me down. She did a great job of distracting me, but I never forgot why we were loafing around the house instead of working. Despite this, I enjoyed the day. They say that trouble shared is trouble halved. Julie may not have believed that I was reliving the day, but overall she was very supportive. As evening approached, I suddenly thought of a new way to prove it. Trauma. What, baby? Trauma, your hospital soap opera. There's a new episode coming out tonight. I've already watched it twice. I'll tell you what happens next. I don't know. I really don't like spoilers. What? Just kidding, she laughed. I'm sorry, I know I shouldn't be joking. It was just too easy. Come on, baby, tell me what's going to happen tonight. I smiled. She had turned me on, and it wasn't hard for me to break the tension a little. Okay, there will be a school bus accident, and 4 kids will be rushed to the ER. 3 will just have cuts and broken bones, but the 4th, a little girl, will have internal bleeding. She will need emergency surgery, and later in the series they will have to return when a bone fragment missed the first time perforates a vein. Dr. Waters and Dr. Shaw hook up in the pantry. Nurse Johnson gets an ultimatum from the ward's head nurse. Either she gets her drug addiction under control, or she loses her job. And Dr. Drimmy receives a paternity suit, but from whom it comes remains unknown. There was silence for a moment while Julie tried to comprehend what had been said. There are too many details for this to be mere speculation, I'll tell you that. Don't take this the wrong way, but I'd like to refrain from commenting until the show is released. Of course, dear. I take no offense. I don't blame you for being skeptical. I'm just glad you're willing to mess with me and keep an open mind. When trauma was turned on, Julie sat forward and watched with laser-like intensity. After 20 minutes, she started throwing odd looks at me. By 40, she looked mostly confused. By the time the show was over, she looked a little scared. This is the real thing. You've actually seen this before. I don't understand how this is possible. Are you really living the same day over and over again? 3 times now. But I don't remember anything. Is it just you, or is the whole world caught in this time loop and only you remember? And why is this happening? Trust my wife to ask the questions I should have asked. I was too absorbed in the moment to think rationally about my situation. I don't understand a damn thing, honey. But with you at my side, I feel like a huge weight has been lifted off my shoulders. Well, I don't know how much it helps me to figure out how and why this is happening. It's some Stephen Hawking type shit. But more important than figuring out how it works is this. Can we stop it? That threw me off balance. Stop it? Truth be told, I was just hoping it would stop on its own. Maybe tomorrow I'll wake up and it'll be Saturday. That's the way it's supposed to be. This time loop, to say the least, is not natural. It can't go on for long. Can it? We bickered for a while longer, but it was getting close to 11 Esau, and we started to stall. We hadn't really done much for the day, but he was very emotionally drained. I'd been up since 5 in the morning, racking my brain trying to find validation for what I was going through, and afraid that I couldn't. That maybe I really was losing my mind. Maybe we should just go to bed and talk about it in the morning, I said. But I won't remember anything in the morning, baby. We'll have to start all over again. Holy shit. How could I have forgotten about this? I really wasn't thinking straight. That's it, Julie shouted. What exactly? Don't go to bed. The day resets to 0 when you go to bed. So, don't go to bed. Is it really that simple? Just stay up until midnight until Saturday, July 16th. It was that simple. You're a genius, honey. We really thought we were pretty smart, or at least Julie did. In retrospect, it was silly to be so excited about our little half-baked hypothesis. We had no idea of the mechanism of this time loop. Having survived many more days, I still don't know. I had some solid guesses, but they remained guesses. We sat up until midnight with no problem. We were pumped up on adrenaline, and when the clock struck 12 a.m., we were jumping up and down like kangaroos on speed. Gradually, our jumping, dancing, and congratulatory kisses died down. We both seemed to come to the realization at the same time. "Is that it?" asked Julie at the same time I did. "How do we know it worked? What if it doesn't happen at midnight? What if it happens when I'm asleep?" Julie didn't have an answer. As the adrenaline weathered away, I suddenly felt fatigue in my bones. "You go to sleep, Han, and I'll go get some coffee and see how long I can hold out. If the time loop is already broken, I'm just going to have a shitty Saturday. You have no reason to miss your vacation." "Nonsense. We're doing this together." I only smiled. That's the beauty of marriage, knowing someone has your back. I won't bore you with all the things we did to stay awake. Julie ended up passing out sitting at the kitchen table a little after 4. I didn't bother to wake her up. I sat and watched her face, not thinking about anything, just loving her. I can't be sure, but I don't think I fell asleep. Friday, July 15th, 2016. Day 4. Day 3. Laid the groundwork for the next week or so. I woke Julie up, without yelling, and told her what was going on. Once I convinced her that I was serious, she would call us both off work. Personally, I wouldn't have bothered, but that's Julie. Plus, I was rarely able to prove that we were caught in a time loop before it was time to go to work. That's something I've gotten better at, though. I started paying more attention to my surroundings to better anticipate the events of the days that followed. It seemed to me that one of the few benefits of being in the time loop was foresight. So why let it go to waste by being a lazy ass? It took a little practice, actually a hell of a lot of practice, but eventually I developed superior situational awareness. So did we combine our awesome intellects and beat the bitch? Not exactly. Mostly we speculated about what happened in my situation. Did God, with a capital G or otherwise, really do this? That seemed unlikely. Neither my wife nor I were particularly religious. We hadn't seen the inside of a church since we were married, so we couldn't think of a reason why any deity, if there was one, would show interest in me. It's very simple. I am the chosen one. Julie smiled. The chosen one? Of course you are, baby. What were you chosen for? For greatness, obviously. Of course, silly me. But who chose you for that greatness, Sam? Someone very wise. Very wise. When a choice has to be made, choose Sam. Well, I certainly chose you. You can't fail at logic, baby, she laughed. Another day, another conversation. Maybe I'm Scrooge, I said. And then I'd be the ghost of Christmas? That's actually not a bad idea, Sam. I know, I was half serious. There are lots of stories about people caught in strange time warps. Usually the purpose is to teach them something. Maybe these stories are based on some shared memory, a fictionalized retelling of something we instinctively know is possible? Julie looked thoughtful. But what do you have to learn? It's too early for Christmas cheer. I've never been a bah humbug anyway, I replied. Maybe there's something special today. Neither of us could think of anything, so we turned to the internet. Well, I said, today is National Tapioca Pudding Day. So maybe you need to learn the power of pudding. Easy, we'll buy some at the store. I don't mind, but just in case, we should keep looking. Another day. Another conversation. If it's not the work of a higher power, there must be a scientific explanation. Where do we start looking for answers? What do we even call what's happening to you? Asked Julie. Let's just call it a time loop. We're dealing with time, so it should be a physics or math problem, I guess. Agreed, babe, she replied. There's probably some super nerd somewhere on campus who's devoted his life to studying time distortions. She thought for a moment. Actually, saying that out loud, I'm sure there are plenty of people who study time. I just don't know if any of them could be of any use to us. I'm sure all their research is purely theoretical. Again, I was struck by how Julie always referred to the problem as our problem and talked about what we needed to do. Even if she wasn't stuck in this time loop, she made it clear that she was with me. It may not have made any practical difference, but I sure as hell appreciated it. So, should we try to research time warps? Asked Julie. Where should we even start? We could watch the Rocky Horror Picture Show. She giggled. I'm serious, Sam. Me too, Jules. Very serious. You wake up every day and come in here fresh. I give you a summary of what we talked about and you get right down to the problem. You never lose enthusiasm because it's always new to you. But I've been talking about it nonstop for 12 days now. I'm starting to burn out. Let's go to the nicest restaurant we can get into without an appointment. Then we'll go to the movies. Not Rocky Horror. Then we'll go home, make love, and try again tomorrow. What do you say? I don't know, Julie mused. Are you sure you don't want to? I jumped up and lifted her out of the chair. It wasn't that hard since I was over 7 inches taller than her and almost 100 pounds. I carried her, putting one hand under her knees and the other behind her back. I rocked her back and forth slightly at first, and then, it's just a jump to the left, I muttered, matching the action to the words. Julie squealed as we rose into the air. And then a step. Come on, Jules. Sing with me. In stereoscopic. Let's do the time warp again. Friday, July 15th, 2016. Day 16. Day 16 will be a pivotal day in my marriage, though it will be a few more days before I realize it. The night before, we watched the movie Girls after a nice dinner at an Italian restaurant. She said I owed her a debt of gratitude for being a rude man. I didn't mind. Now I could honestly say I had seen that movie if we went to the movies again, and I assumed we would. We went right back to our routine of waking up, proving I was stuck in a time loop, and talking her to death. Once again, we got to the point where Julie suggested we start researching time anomalies. I, of course, knew this was coming and had already thought about it. I didn't want to discourage Julie, but I just didn't see any benefit to going that route. Doing serious research in one day was simply unthinkable. I couldn't keep notes. If I found a scientist who might have the information I needed, I had one day to contact him or her, convince them I was serious, and get immediate answers. Forget about traveling. Forget about forging collaborations with multiple scientists. I didn't even know what questions I should be asking. With enough study, I could become an expert. But I'm not a genius. How long would it take me to accumulate so much esoteric knowledge, especially if I had to rely on my memory at every turn? But the biggest problem was that I didn't think this time loop I was stuck in could be explained using modern science or math. As Arthur C. Clarke said, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. There might be a scientific explanation, but I doubted it would make any sense to me or anyone else on Earth. My intuition told me that it wasn't a scientific explanation, but some kind of mystical explanation. At least, I hoped it was. I hoped there was some kind of intelligence behind the noose because if there wasn't, simply put, if it was science, I was screwed. If it was divinity or spiritualism or whatever, there was a chance it was over. On that basis, I decided that one night of relaxation wasn't enough. Julie was in the middle of her previous line of thought. There are a lot of people who study time, only I don't know if any of them can be of any use to us. I'm sure all their research is, time out, dear. I'm sorry to interrupt. I swear you used the same words you used last night. That's my fault. I should have brought you up to speed so we could move forward without backtracking. Though we may have come to the end of that thought. Soon it will take up so much time in a day that we won't have time to draw new conclusions. So what are we suggesting? Giving up? She asked a little irritably. No, just hear me out. I know you're fresh and ready to take on this problem. Believe me, I want to, but after 2 weeks, the lack of progress is starting to annoy me. She looked a little angry. Before she could say anything, I tried to talk her out of it. The lack of progress is entirely my fault. You've been my backbone. All the progress we've made is 90% down to you. But we're starting to repeat ourselves. I think it's inevitable. Put 2 people in the same day, in the same place, with the same problem, and 2 weeks later, it's hard to find new ground to talk about. I gotta figure out a way to get us out of this rut. And personally, I need a release. I feel like I have a disease and I'm being treated every day. Good, she replied. I realize that having the same conversation every day for 2 weeks in a row can be exhausting. Do you want to put it off until tomorrow? Maybe not until tomorrow. You don't remember, but I cut this conversation short last night, too. We went out and had some fun. Let's do something like that again. But tomorrow. I don't think I'll tell you about the time loop. What? She shrieked. You won't tell me. We're together, Buster, and don't you forget it. It's only for one day. Since you won't remember it anyway, I'll tell you my plan. I thought I'd send you a few dozen flowers in the morning at work to make other women jealous. I'll drive to New York, buy your favorite corned beef sandwich at Katz and surprise you for lunch. Then I'll use the rest of the day to plan a romantic evening for us. What do you say? I watched her reaction to my plan, trying to see how my romantic gestures would be received. How many guys can ask their wives for advice on how to entice them? And then, when I start wooing her, it will look spontaneous. Sweet. Her reaction puzzled me. She smiled at the thought of flowers in the office, but as soon as I mentioned surprising her with lunch, she went a little pale. I don't think she even remembered my plans for the evening. That all sounds wonderful, Sam, but maybe just flowers at work. We'll be bi-monthly paychecks for all the nurses and support staff. I'll be so swamped, I probably won't carve out more than 15 minutes to eat wherever I am. If I don't know what you're going through and I don't, I'll probably refuse lunch. And if I don't turn it down, I won't appreciate it. Plus, I'll expect you to be at work. You should take the day for yourself. Go into town and have some fun. Maybe go to a movie and walk around Central Park. Don't worry about me. When we meet again the next day, I won't notice the difference. I guess it all made sense, although I still thought her response was a bit harsh. I knew she was a very conscientious worker, so the thought of her refusing to work through lunch didn't really bother me. But why did it bother her? Could she have gotten so upset at the mere thought of turning me down? She must really love me, I thought. Friday, July 15th, 2016, day 17. I took my wife's advice, and then I drove to New York City and had breakfast at Russ and Daughters. They are famous for their smoked salmon. It's called Classic, on a bagel with cream cheese. That's fantastic, but in my opinion, the Classic pales in comparison to the Mensch, which replaces the salmon with smoked sturgeon. I swear the first time I tasted it, I had to go home and change my pants. After breakfast, I headed to the Met. I'm not a big fan of art per se, so I stayed away from the modern art section. But I'm a big history buff, so I took my time visiting the medieval and Egyptian exhibits. I ended up spending most of the day there. In the morning, I spent some time online to arrange a flower delivery for Julie. Around noon, I felt a little guilty that she had to work and I took the day off to play tourist. I should have insisted on a day off for both of us. Why hadn't I thought of that sooner? We could have spent every day together if we wanted to. I decided to call her just to tell her I loved her and to ask if she liked the flowers. I pulled out my phone and saw that it was off. I had turned it off to avoid calls from work since I hadn't bothered to call. Besides, there was no point in keeping in touch with the world at large when you're stuck in a time loop. Nothing could be tolerated. I turned it on and saw that I'd missed a call from Julie. Damn, I should have thought she'd call when she got the flowers. She left a message and, as expected, thanked me for the thoughtful gesture and told me she loved me. Damn, I would have loved to return that call. I guess we were playing a phone game because I couldn't reach her either. First, I called her internal number at the hospital and got an automated message that she wasn't at work. Then I called her cell phone, but the receiver was immediately transferred to voicemail. I didn't hesitate long. Julie said she was going to have a busy day, so it was possible that she would be hard to reach. As for the cell phone, there could be a lot of reasons for it to be disconnected. She called me back a couple hours later while I was sitting in a small neighborhood park watching people. Hey babe, sorry I missed your call. I've been running around all day. Did you get my message? The girls in the office were so jealous. Susan said she's going to fight me for you. Yeah, I think you can handle her, Jules. You have about 30 years under your belt. I'm counting on you to defend my honor. Don't worry about it, we've come to an agreement. She backed down from her challenge when I said you'd be her love slave for the weekend. I knew it was a joke, but for a moment I was at a loss for words as I imagined servicing Mistress Susan. For a woman in her 50s, she looked pretty damn attractive. I'm not a submissive, but I like the look of a woman in leather. Are you here, baby? Asked Julie. I didn't bother to clarify with her where I was. Sorry, honey. I was just looking on Amazon for a GIMP mask. Oh my god, I should let you do that so I can see it, she laughed. Anyway, I really wanted to thank you. It's nice for a girl to know she's loved. I'll show you my appreciation properly tonight. It's a date. I love you, Julie. I love you too, Sam. It didn't occur to me to ask why her phone was off during dinner. Friday, July 15th, 2016. Day 18. I sat up in bed and stretched. Every morning my body felt equally rested no matter what I did the day before. But even on this morning, I felt more rested after giving myself a mental health day. The only way to make it better would be to have Julie by my side. I should have woken her up and gone back to trying to unravel this time loop. But I decided to change the plan. Determination and firmness were not going to solve this problem. I decided I would just go with the flow more. Maybe try to diversify my daily routine. I may be stuck in a time loop, but that doesn't mean I have to relive the same day over and over again. Well, yes, I do. But you know what I mean. Up until now, I've spent the vast majority of my time at home, figuratively speaking, banging my head against the wall. From now on, I've decided to get outside more often. If I was going to be stuck in this day, I should make the most of it. Of course, if I was going to try to live my very limited life to the fullest, I needed my wife by my side. Convincing her that I was caught in a time loop was old school. But after I showed her the gravity of the situation, could I convince her not to take it seriously? I could already see that her instinct was to suck it up and try to make sense of what was going on. I had to think about how to approach Julie. Maybe try to talk her into spending the day with me without even mentioning the time loop. The idea was very appealing if I just wanted to spend a carefree day with her. But would I be able to talk her into skipping out? She took her job very seriously. I glanced at the clock. Julie's alarm would be ringing in less than half an hour. I still didn't know what to tell her. I hastily threw on some clothes and left the house before Julie woke up. I decided that I would let her go to work and take care of another me day. That afternoon, I seriously considered how I could get Julie to excuse herself from work without an emergency. With a little work, I could turn my endless drudgery into an endless honeymoon. I headed to the mall and wandered around as the stores opened. A bookstore caught my eye, and I wandered around until I found a novel that appealed to me. After making my purchase, I headed to the food court and sat down with a cinnamon bun and coffee to read for a while. If I couldn't finish the novel today, I could buy it again tomorrow. For a while, I lost track of time. The hard plastic chairs in the food court finally bored me around 11 EG. I was hungry again, but I didn't feel like going home. Even if I wanted to make a meal, I'd have to clean up after myself and sweep the house like a crime scene so Julie wouldn't guess I'd skipped work. Not far from the entrance to our gated neighborhood was a hipster diner. The walls were hung with minimalist paintings and the food was overpriced and small. But there were cozy seating areas with cushioned chairs and ottomans that were perfect for relaxing and reading over a meal. I managed to grab a window seat, surrounded by covenants of pampered housewives sipping their half-coffee, half-soy caramel macchiato lattes. I had just placed my order and was about to dive back into my book when I looked out the window and saw Julie's Honda Pilot drive by. My first thought was surprised that she had time to drive home for lunch when she had been talking about how busy she was this Friday for days on end. My second thought was, why is Dr. Richard Peters following her in his Porsche? Dr. Peters was the head of the oncology department at St. Gertrude's Hospital. I had met him at several hospital events I attended with my wife. I didn't particularly like him, but not because of anything in particular, but because he had that rock star arrogance that some doctors have. He was generally dismissive of anyone who wasn't rich, handsome, or, better yet, wasn't a doctor himself. As far as I knew, Julie and Dr. Peters had no particular reason to socialize at the hospital, and they certainly had no reason to meet for lunch at our house. At that moment, I still didn't believe that anything untoward was going on. It just went against everything I thought I knew about my wife. My mind was blank, almost numb. I don't remember leaving the diner or getting into the car. I must have paid the bill because no one ran out after me. Likewise, the road to my house was covered in a haze. Dr. Peters' car was parked in my driveway, where it could be seen by all the gossipy housewives in our upper-class neighborhood. I stood in the driveway and watched her. It could have lasted 30 seconds or 30 minutes. The phone lines must have been red hot. Mabel, look out the window. Sam Watley came home early. Get the popcorn. I walked through the front door, hoping they were in the formal living room discussing Medicaid reimbursement. But the living room was empty except for Julie's purse on the table by the door. As I slowly climbed the stairs, I felt a rhythmic thumping. Our bed was a sturdy structure, and it took some serious effort to make the headboard rattle. There was no longer any doubt about what was happening, but my mind was unwilling to accept it. There had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe they had come here to retrieve a document Julie had left at home and spontaneously started playing monkeys jumping on the bed. But that wasn't it. I opened the door to the destruction of my world. It's been 6 years since we said our wedding vows, but I finally caught Julie in a lie. Friday, July 15th, 2016, day 18. I don't know how long I stood in the doorway watching Dr. Peters entertain my wife. It seemed like an eternity to me, but it was more likely a couple minutes. My first impulse was to leave. I'm a big guy who's never had to fight. The last time I threw a punch was in elementary school. So my first thought is to avoid conflict, not because I'm afraid of it, but because it's the civilized thing to do. If it weren't for the time loop, I probably would have used my phone to take a short video before I left to decide how I would deal with my cheating wife. But why would I need video evidence? It would be gone the next morning. I looked at the white walls of our bedroom and briefly considered turning them into a Jackson Pollock painting. Pictures of arterial spray paint danced in my head. I stood there, paralyzed with indecision. I hadn't even considered what I would do if Julie cheated on me. It was an impossibility. I trusted her loyalty far more than I trusted my own. I took a half step back, preparing to walk away, but then, to hell with it. Nothing I did would have the proper effect. But that also meant I could do whatever the hell I wanted. I stormed into the room, grabbed Dr. Peters by the hair on the back of his neck, and pulled him back from my wife. With my left hand, I started injecting him in his kidneys, at least where I thought his kidneys were. Two things happened in quick succession. Julie screamed. Dr. Peters twisted out of my grip and elbowed me in the cheekbone. I felt it crack. "Oh God, no!" Julie screamed. "Sam, no, please, this can't be happening." While Julie was trying to find something intelligible to say, Dr. Peters and I were busy with something else. I was still holding his hair. He couldn't fully turn around without ripping them out. But I couldn't take advantage of my advantage. I threw wild punches at him with my left arm, but his elbow stunned me. My punches had no power. Peters leaned forward, throwing me off balance, and then crawled backward, launching his elbow again. If the first blow cracked my cheekbone, the second shattered it. My face made a sound like that of a trampled watermelon. I saw stars. The adrenaline in my system must have kept me from passing out. I let go of Peters and stumbled backward. I even managed to raise my arms to assume a fighting stance. And then, the man beat the crap out of me. Dr. Peters was 20 years older, 5 inches shorter, and 40 pounds lighter than me. But he clearly knew how to fight, which was something I couldn't say. I'd like to think I could have put on a better show if my face hadn't looked like a bag of broken glass. He delivered a series of right and left punches to my face and body. There were no more blows to my left cheek, either for Peters' reasons or because my entire strategy in this fight was to avoid getting hit there again. Even if my cheek wasn't hit, every movement reverberated with a stabbing pain in my face. A broken nose soon joined the shattered cheekbone. Tears flooded my eyes. I could taste the blood. Through a watery haze, I saw Dr. Peters turn around and deliver an honest-to-God spinning kick. I may have seen him coming, but damn it, it was all I could do to stop him. His foot went right into my ribs. I felt and heard them break. Ever since I'd pulled Peters away from her, Julie had been screaming. It was mostly incoherent wails, but among them were pleas to stop fighting. I wouldn't have minded a truce, but Peters looked like he'd just been warmed up. Dr. Peters was shuffling his feet, about to throw another punch, when Julie straddled him from behind. "Stop. Stop. Don't hurt him." Peters was distracted, trying to pull Julie's arm away from him. I acted on instinct and, more by luck than skill, finally managed to land a hard punch. I threw my weight forward and punched him in the jaw. Dr. Peters may have been a champion at throwing punches, but he was a weakling when it came to taking them. He went out like a light. Peters, Julie, and I fell in a heap. I landed on Peters and then slowly rolled off of him. All my attention was focused on Peters. I almost expected him to wake up and pounce on me like a Hollywood axe murderer. "Oh my God," my wife screamed. "Your face. Baby, lie still. We need an ambulance." Still with that, we. I think we've been through this before. The sight of the woman I loved made me nauseous. I didn't want her help. I didn't want to accept her. She ran out of the room. I heard her coming down the stairs. It confused me. Where was she going? Her clothes were here in the bedroom. Stumbling, I rose to my feet. I diligently kept myself upright on each step. I seemed to have trouble with my balance. I finally reached our driveway and discovered where Julie had run off to. Her purse and cell phone were on the table by the door. As I staggered past her, she was just talking. 555. Heatview Terrace. My husband needs an ambulance. He got into a fight. He has serious facial injuries. Please hurry. Sam? Sam, where are you going? You need help. You're hurt. She tried to stop me as I walked out the door. Normally, this wouldn't have been controversial, but the adrenaline from the fight had worn off. The pain and dizziness was getting worse by the moment. Julie tried to wrap one arm around me while the other held the phone. The 911 operator's voice could be heard on the line. "Ma'am, are you there? Are you in danger? What's going on?" I squeezed through the door and stepped out. Julie relinquished the phone. She threw it to the ground and ducked down, wrapping both arms around one of my legs. "Stop! Stop!" I kept walking, dragging her along with me. At this rate, I'd never make it to my car. Despite all the pain she had caused me, I still didn't want to hurt my wife. I put my palm on her forehead and pushed her off my foot. I think I was a little rougher than I wanted to be. She shrieked and let go of me, and I switched to a sprint before she could get to her feet. I got to my Taurus a few steps ahead of her and locked the doors. I saw her jump back as I started the engine and pulled away. She even ran after me for a few steps, waving her arms. I pulled out of our neighborhood onto the main thoroughfare. I drove about 2 blocks before I was stopped at a stoplight. I heard a scream and looked at the car waiting in the next lane. A woman in a silver minivan was looking at me with her hand over her mouth. Behind her back, I saw a little boy with his eyes wide open, face pressed against the glass. What the hell was that? I pulled back the sun visor and looked at the mirror in it. Oh shit. My eyes were already bloodshot and black. My nose was off to the side of my face, a fan of blood spreading underneath, covering my mouth and shirt. But the worst was my cheek. It felt like half of my face had sunk inward. The left eye seemed to sit lower on the face. You could have shoved a baseball into the hollow where the cheekbone was. I guess that explained why Julie was so furious. It was such a shock that my first thoughts were, who is this guy? How is he still conscious? It took a second to realize that the face in the mirror was me. I figured I'd been in pain before. But now the agony was blinding, as if the gods were waiting for a break in the action to bring Thor's hammer down on me. I literally couldn't see. White-hot lightning bolts pierced my face, spreading across my cheek and behind my eyes. I know the light turned green because the cars behind me honked. A soothing voice sounded to my left. A woman in a minivan walked over and opened my car door. I also heard a quiet groan that I realized was coming from me. "It's okay, sir," the woman said. "Help is on the way." Almost immediately, a police car appeared, followed by an ambulance. I wondered how they had gotten there so quickly. Soon my question was answered. "Mr. Watley, don't move. We got a call from your wife. You have sustained a serious head injury. Try not to move." I wanted to tell the officer to keep that bitch away from me, but the words wouldn't come from my broken face. Luckily, she hadn't arrived on the scene yet, or I might have tried to drive away again. The ambulance staff put a neck brace on me and then gently pulled me out of the car and strapped me into a headboard. I looked up at the sky scrolling in my watery vision. Then the interior of the ambulance. I felt a prick in my arm. What is this? Friday, July 15, 2016. Day 19. I sat up abruptly. My hands reached for my face. Sure enough, everything was fine. The pain was gone and my head was clear. I should have expected the damage to go away, but it was a relief. Up until now, I'd seen the rest of the world reboot every day. And here was proof that I was too. And yet, I sat in bed unconsciously rubbing my face for a full 10 minutes. Soon my thoughts returned to my wife. I stood in our bedroom doorway and looked at Julie sleeping. Who was this stranger in my wife's body? I would bet my life on her loyalty. And lost. I turned and walked back to the guest room, started robotically dressing. How did it start? Why? How long had it been going on? I wanted answers, to understand why the woman I'd given my heart to had thrown it to the ground and stomped on it. I could just ask her. If there was one word to describe my wife, it was honest. I don't mean that she told it like it is. To say someone tells it like it is to say they're an asshole. I have no choice but to be a rude and annoying asshole because I'm telling it like it is. No, Julie was honest in the truest sense of the word. She never said anything that was knowingly untrue or that she didn't believe in. She kept her promises and did her best to honor her commitments. If the cashier gave her too much change, she gave it back. If she found something, she diligently tried to return it to the owner. And I didn't know how she would reconcile that with breaking her marriage vows. But I could ask. I knew that if I asked her direct questions, I would get answers. But that path seemed very unsatisfying. I didn't know what questions I should ask. Also, although Julie was honest, she wasn't always forthright. She might have refused to answer some questions. Complete silence wouldn't work. After all, if you couldn't deny that you'd cheated. But she didn't have to tell me everything. And that's what I wanted to know. Everything. Given the nature of the time loop, I could interrogate her indefinitely. I could hone my interrogation techniques, trial and error to figure out what questions to ask. Once I knew more, I could use that information to get more answers out of her. But I didn't like it. I felt raw, vulnerable. I didn't want to see her, let alone talk to her. The thought of sitting with my wife day after day, prying out the details of her cheating caused me physical pain. I wanted to find out for myself what Julie was doing behind my back. That way, when I finally confronted her, if I confronted her, I would be armed with knowledge. I would know if she was trying to minimize or hide something from me. I needed full and open candor, which was usually a given in a relationship with Julie. But what could she hide if I relied solely on her willingness to talk and my uninformed questions? But how? I couldn't resort to high tech, tapping her phone or installing cameras in our house. That would be pointless. I'd only have one day of evidence. Unless she decided to call a friend and tell her life story, I was screwed. I already knew she'd be having fun with Dr. Peters, or Dr. Dick, as I was starting to think of him at noon. What else could I find out? Come to think of it, by putting a bug in the house, I could hear any conversation between Julie and Dr. Dick. That could be useful. Besides, I could tell Julie what I know about her affair and then leave. If I somehow tapped her phone, I could hear some calls to her family or friends. I could do that, but still, with only one day to monitor my wife, I considered surveillance a weak option at best. Likewise, contacting a private investigator would be a waste of time. What would they be able to discover in less than 24 hours? Even if I could talk them into dropping everything and starting immediately. Eureka. And then I remembered reading somewhere that the vast majority of detectives are now technology-driven. No longer do detectives walk the streets, knock on doors, or search back alleys. The vast majority of the information needed for an investigation was on the internet. They searched databases for information, combed through phone records, and scoured social media accounts. I might not have enough time to do some old-fashioned surveillance on my wife, but maybe I could follow her cyber footprints. One thing I was sure of, Julie wasn't keeping her illicit affair a secret. She had a best friend and a sister she told everything to, and a mother to whom she told almost as much. I was blinded by rage for a moment at the thought, but I knew I was right. She often claimed she had no secrets from either Emma or Liz. One day I asked, "What about secrets from me?" And she replied, "Girls have to keep a certain amount of mystery." So I needed to get into her laptop or her cell phone. The cell phone was best. That way I could access both text messages and emails. Today was too late. By the time I had developed a plan of action, Julie was at work. I drove to the same diner as the day before. Tomorrow, I vowed. Tomorrow, I would begin my search for answers. Friday, July 15th, 2016, day 20. I crept into the bedroom and grabbed Julie's phone from the bedside table. I quickly checked to see if the phone opened by fingerprint. Nothing. That would be the easiest thing to do. I could swipe it while she slept. I went downstairs and grabbed the bag she kept her laptop in on my way out the door. I left my phone in place of my wife's phone. They were the same model. I figured it would take her a while to realize there had been a switch. She might sleep through the night without an alarm clock. Then her password wouldn't work. And then she'd realize it was my phone, maybe when she saw that her laptop was gone. I took the train to New York. My plan was to ride the subway all day around New York City. I expected Julie to just leave for work. She might try to call her phone, but I wouldn't answer it. If she went online at work and tried to use GPS to track her phone, it would be a couple hours away and constantly on the move. To unlock the phone, I had to guess my wife's PIN number. First, I tried birthdays. Hers, mine, my parents'. Hell, I didn't know her best friend Liz's birthday or the rest of her family. They were stored on my calendar, on my cell phone. Well, I'll skip the whole switching phones gambit tomorrow. I realized it was pointless. I did it so Julie wouldn't find a way to contact our service provider and report the phone stolen. Even without my phone, I was sure she would know who had taken it. Would she report it stolen if she thought her husband had it? I was sure she wouldn't. She would wait until I confronted her at home. And then I hoped she was biting her nails at the thought of me accessing her data. Well, no birthdays until tomorrow. In the meantime, I started looking at common number combinations. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All angles. An X across the entire number pad. I soon encountered a more serious problem. After 7 failed attempts, the phone locked me out for 5 minutes. Each subsequent failure increased the lock time. After the 9th attempt, I went to get something to eat because I had an hour to kill before the phone would let me try again. Finally, after attempt number 10, it locked permanently. It directed me to the company's website to reactivate the phone. I decided that I could not complete with all the security measures required to reactivate it. I threw the phone in the trash can at the subway station. I'll get back to it tomorrow. Time to turn my attention to the laptop. I booted it up. First, I ran my finger over the fingerprint scanner to see if it had that feature enabled. This did absolutely nothing, not even an error message popped up. No fingerprint found. So that was ruled out. Of course, it was password protected. Fortunately, I could guess it all I wanted, and it never blocked me. I tried our names, names of friends and family, favorite movies, her car. I went through everything that mattered to Julie in my mind and typed it in. Nothing. I spent all day guessing passwords, but then I gave up and checked into a hotel. Tomorrow. I spent the next couple weeks trying to hack into Julie's phone. After 5 days, I gave up on the laptop. I could still get email from her phone, and with a full keyboard, there were infinitely more possible passwords. I tried calling our cell phone carrier and bluffing them into unlocking Julie's phone, but they got me. Even talking in a high-pitched voice and pretending to be Julie didn't work. That's it. I only had 10 attempts a day, and there was plenty of time left. I decided to renew my commitment to live each day to the fullest. The first step of this plan was going to be money. I was going to cross off every item I had ever even considered putting on my wish list. Most of the things I could just go and do. Visit all the museums, theme parks, fairs, and tourist attractions within a day's drive of Trenton, New Jersey. Go skydiving, jumping in a bounce house, riding an ostrich. But many of the things on my personal to-do list required money. A lot of money. You'd think money wasn't a problem for me. I worked on Wall Street and made quite comfortable 6-figure sums. But I was up to my eyeballs in debt. Before I found out that my wife was a god-awful whore, I would have said her main flaw was that she was spoiled. She enjoyed comfort and didn't like to be denied. Her parents were upper middle class but not rich. But Julie had great ambition. 6 years after graduation, we both had student loans. With the deferments we'd taken, it was going to be at least another 6 years before they were paid off. I had a closet full of designer suits, which I considered a necessary business expense if I wanted to be taken seriously in the world of finance. Julie's clothing bills were an order of magnitude higher than mine. The amount she spent on shoes could buy my entire closet. She had a whole line of Jimmy Choo. And the handbags. Oh my God. Coach, Prada, Gucci, Louis Vuitton. Then there was our house. We were making good money, but the gated neighborhood we lived in was beyond our means. The only thing I put a cross on was our cars. I was happy with my old Taurus. I only drove it to the transportation hub anyway. But Julie wanted a luxury car. We fought several times over what we wanted, not what we could afford. Eventually, she gave in and said she would buy a Honda. Sure enough, she bought a Pilot, Honda's most expensive car, with every option possible. So yeah, money. And I didn't have any. So every day, after 10 attempts to hack into Julie's phone, I did something I hadn't planned to do. Go to work. And don't get me wrong, I hadn't forgotten my wife was a whore. But I needed something to distract me. The first few nights, after either getting locked up or refusing Julie's devices, I did something I had never done before. Drink myself into a stupor. I'm not a drinker. My theory was that most people start drinking in their youth to fit in and be cool. In college, heavy libations become almost mandatory. By the time we reach adulthood, drinking seems like a prerequisite for fun. I didn't start in my youth. My parents only occasionally drank beer. I never saw them drink more than 2 at a time. They let me satisfy my curiosity with a few sips over the years. I'll just say this, beer tastes like ass. I highly doubt many people have tried beer for the first time and liked it. It's an acquired taste. I never acquired it. But now I was looking for a way to escape a painful reality, and nothing kills brain cells in clouds, memories like hard alcohol. I had a new appreciation for the joys of alcohol. And I bought a few bottles of hard liquor and retired to my hotel. Then I would drink myself into a stupor until I woke up the next morning. One of the benefits of the time loop, no hangovers. But an unexpected drawback to this plan put an end to my drinking. I must have drank too fast and passed out. That's what I intended to do, but I didn't plan on waking up unconscious on Friday. I had my first dream in a month. I woke up in a cold sweat and looked at the clock. 12:45. I grabbed the last unopened bottle of rum that was on the bed next to me. I drank it as fast as I could. I felt dizzy and nauseous, but I kept drinking. Friday, July 15th, 2016, day 26. What is love? Baby, don't hurt me, don't hurt me, don't hurt me, no more. No more drinking. I vowed not to get drunk every day. But if I wasn't going to drink to distract myself, then I needed something else. And so, Operation Instant Millionaire began. I was still spending my mornings typing pins into Julie's phone. But when I got to New York, I really got to work. I briefly considered stealing the money. I didn't have to worry about getting caught. I had access to the private account information of my mutual fund members. I could drain enough money to last me an entire day before one of my subordinates caught me. And if I did get caught, I would only spend a few hours in jail. But that's not the way I was set up. Besides, I had the means to make a quick fortune honestly. Day trading. I didn't trade for clients at Broadwell and Marks. My work was purely analytical, but I had access to all of the company's standard market analysis tools and the ability to make trades on my personal portfolio. I didn't have a lot of money in my stock portfolio, at least comparatively, about $20,000. Personally, I would have preferred to use that money to pay off some debt. But for a Wall Street dweller, not having money invested is taboo. It's like it is for a vegetarian butcher. In fact, even though our personal finances should be private, the higher-ups use their systemic access to peak. I've often wondered if my reluctance to risk my own money in the market is holding me back at Broadwell and Marks. But you might ask, why work on Wall Street if you don't trust your own judgment when investing? I trust my judgment. If I do my research on a company, I have no problem pulling the trigger. But I don't want to spend all my free time working on it. I can't invest in the companies and products. I research for our mutual funds. They have a name for it. Insider trading. Our funds have enormous buying power, the accumulated wealth of thousands of investors. So when a fund buys a stock, its price changes. Every share bought or sold moves the price. In a single transaction, our B&M Small Capital Growth Fund, for example, might buy several 100,000 shares of some company. If you knew about a trade like that in advance, not so I couldn't trade the stocks I was researching for the firm. All those long hours I spent analyzing were useless for personal enrichment. I would have to do additional market research in my spare time. Or I could have done what many of my colleagues did. I could have cheated. While I couldn't trade based on my own inside information, I could get away with trading based on someone else's information. Let's say a friend working in another department knows about a big trade his fund is preparing. He passes the information on to me so I can use it to make a quick profit. I then return the favor at a future date. Also illegal, but harder to prove. This is partly how the wolves of Wall Street make their fortunes. They are careful to leave no trace, no emails, nothing in writing. All communication is either in person or via landline phones. Not all of them do this, but most cut corners to one degree or another. Even if you get caught, it's not a black mark. You may pay some fines, even spend a little time in federal prison. But if you made a lot of money for yourself and especially for your investors, Wall Street is quick to forgive. There was no question that my refusal to play the game was holding back my career. My ability to network in the financial world was hindered by the fact that I didn't know how to work my back. Truth be told, I could have succumbed to the pressure to succeed. Left alone, I would have overstepped the bounds of law and ethics. But Julie was my wife, a woman I considered the epitome of personal and professional integrity. I wouldn't want to disappoint her. I no longer cared what my wife thought. I would have gladly returned to a life of crime as long as this time loop lasted. But I didn't need it. I could make money the honest way, and that's what I'd rather do. The stock market opened at 9:30 and closed at 4:30. I spent my days watching the market in real time, noting every change that could make me money with prior knowledge, which was literally everything. The problem wasn't finding a way to make money. The problem was narrowing the list down to what I could remember. My notes were disappearing with the dawn, and I had to plan my trades in advance so I could go to the office in the morning and then watch my bank account swell over the course of the day. I bought futures, shorted stocks, and made margin purchases. I started making trades on day 2. A week later, I was making about $300,000 at the end of the day. After 2, it was already $1.2 million. I never stopped making small adjustments to my formula. I was limited only by my own memory and ability to retain information, which steadily improved as I lingered in the sickly. Eventually, I turned my $20,000 into over $7 million. It could have been more, but I would have had to blow the entire amount before the market closed at 4:30. Instead, I set it up so that the money would start flowing into my checking account at 10 a.m. They gradually grew until I had the entire amount freely available. Now I had the money to do whatever I wanted. Around the time I made my first million, I managed to hack Julie's phone. Friday, July 15th, 2016, day 44. I did my daily route of trying to get into Julie's phone. I was actually thinking more about my stock trades than my phone. Her code was our wedding anniversary. I wasn't sure how to feel about that. I decided to hold off on gratification for a while. I went to work and ordered all my orders for the day. Then I found a quiet place at the New York Public Library where I could study my phone in peace. As I expected, it turned out to be a treasure trove of texts and emails. I spent the rest of the day reading them. The texts were only from 8 months ago when we both got new phones. The emails were from over a year ago. We had free email accounts with limited storage, so we had to erase old messages from time to time. The bad news was that the affair with Peters had already been going on for months. I was sure that what I saw was not the first time, but the texts confirmed it. I saw that they had planned their Friday night affair days in advance. Julie must have contacted him to cancel, in the days we were talking about the time loop. That explained why she got so anxious when I said I'd surprise her with lunch. I wondered if the thought of my time loop falling on the day she planned to cheat on me was stressing her out. Perhaps she was praying for the noose to close before she was caught. Besides, my fears were confirmed. Liz and Emma knew Julie was cheating on me. They had discussed her last meeting with Dr. Dick time and time again. They were also discussing how to keep me from finding out. Since I had to drive an hour and a half to and from New York City, the likelihood of me catching her was very slim as long as she kept her secret meetings to daylight hours. The deceit and betrayal drove me to rage. The lack of respect and humiliation with which she told her friends and family that she was giving me horns was infuriating. The texts between Julie and Dr. Dick were typical crap. Outrageous flirting and innuendo that looked like they were written by 2 teenagers, not married professionals. They only talked about 2 things. what they were going to do to each other, and in Dr. Dick's case, making sure his wife didn't find out. Julie never expressed concern about me catching them, but her messages revealed other things as well. First, although she shared details of her illicit life with only two of her girlfriends, there were several comments that made it clear that others knew too. From Liz. Susan, Julie's boss, didn't give you a hard time for taking a 2-hour lunch yesterday? No, she knows I always make up for missed time, and she says a good night's sleep makes me more productive, lol. From Emma. Mom is going to organize a 5K run against cancer with her church group. She wants you to ask Dr. Peters if he'll give a short speech before it. Why doesn't she ask him herself? I'll introduce her. Why think, you fool? She's not having fun with him, Rofel. My blood boiled. Her mom and boss both knew. If her boss knew, it was probably common knowledge at the hospital. I hadn't seen any reports that explicitly said anyone else knew, but there were subtle hints that she wasn't trying hard to hide what she was doing. Trenton was a big city, and she didn't have to worry about small-town gossip. But she didn't seem concerned that someone in our circle of friends and family might give her away. To me, that meant they knew and were complicit. But the worst thing that was revealed from the texts and emails was not her daring affair with Dr. Dick. No, the worst part was that it was clear from the text that Peters wasn't special. The affair with Peters only lasted a few months. Julie had been cheating long before that. Before Peters, there was another doctor, a pediatrician. Before the pediatrician, there was a neighbor who lived 2 streets away. And before the neighbor, well, I didn't know that. The correspondence lasted a year, and the whole time she was cheating on me. I stared at the phone in my hand for a minute, then threw it against the wall of my hotel room. I aimed for a spectacular rain of plastic and glass, but it just bounced. I walked over and picked it up. There was a small crack in the screen. Oh crap, it took me about 30 seconds to get the protective cover off. This time I threw it as hard as I could at the opposite wall. It left dents in the wall and the battery popped out, but overall it looked intact. Shit! Why won't you die? I screamed, bouncing on my phone. You worthless piece of shit! Goddamn whore! Someone started pounding on the wall. Hey, keep it down in there. People are trying to sleep. Back off! I shouted. I did stop, though. It was getting late, so I turned off the light and lay down on the bedspread, still fully dressed. Until I read her messages, I still harbored a little hope for my marriage. If the affair with Dr. Dick had been a recent blunder, and Julie had shown true remorse, I might have been willing to forgive her, or at least put the matter on hold until the time loop was over. Frankly, my entire world outside of the office revolved around her. I could compromise my pride if I could get my loving wife back. But did I really have one? How could she stab me in the back for so long with so little regard for my feelings, my love, or my reputation? How long had this been going on? Even in the very first emails talking about her lovers, it felt like old business. I wanted to know more, and the texts pointed the way. Several times Julie and her sister talked about their diaries. Either they mentioned putting this and that in the diary, or they wrote in them while corresponding with each other. I had no idea Julie kept a diary. I think if I still trusted her, it wouldn't have bothered me. Diaries by their very nature are deeply personal. If I had known she had such a diary, I would have been eager to peek into it. It's human nature. But where was it? If it was a digital diary, I didn't feel like renewing my attempts to hack into her laptop. I would have done so, but it seemed more likely to me that she kept a physical diary. Julie was proud of her handwriting. She looked for any excuse to send a handwritten letter or card. I was sure that if she kept a diary, it was traditional paper and ink. Tomorrow I would go looking for it. For the first time since I was a little boy, I cried myself to sleep. Friday, July 15th, 2016, day 45. In the morning, I used the time before Julie called to search unlikely hiding places in our house. Our mansion was too big for 2 people. Julie said we would need it when we had kids. I thought we'd be better off with a smaller house and less debt. You can guess who won that argument. I searched the kitchen, looking in all the cabinets and pantries. I checked behind the trash can and even opened the stove before calling myself an idiot and moving on. I looked in all the lower cabinets and opened all the furniture drawers. I didn't expect to find Julie's journal in the public areas of the house. but I had time to check everything thoroughly. I left the house to give Julie time to get up and go to work. I could have gone out for breakfast, but I just drove a block and parked. I hadn't had an appetite since I caught my wife in bed with Dr. Dick. I could go days without eating, my body replenished every morning. After making sure she was gone, I drove back home. At noon, I was to go through the same procedure. I decided I'd better search the bedroom. We shared an office and 2 spare bedrooms, but the master bedroom seemed the most likely place for the diary. I hoped I could find it and leave before Julie brought Dr. Dick home at noon. Where do women hide things? I figured the best place was in the dressing room. I say dressing room because there was definitely no room for my clothes. Our bedroom wasn't grand enough to have its own and other people's walk-in closets, so Julie bought an antique closet for my clothes. I checked all the boxes on the top shelves, set my clothes aside to peek behind them, and pulled shoes out of the drawers. Nothing. Then I turned my attention to her dressing table. It came in a set with my closet. As I felt more cynical, I thought that if she hadn't found that set and loved the chest, my clothes would be in a completely different room. It was a monstrous Victorian thing. I looked in all the drawers and found nothing. I was about to get up and look elsewhere when suddenly a thought struck me. Quality antique furniture was famous for having secret compartments. Julie bought the furniture through a middleman. One day I came home, and there it all was. I wasn't happy about such a waste, but my suits were already feeling the crush from Julie's expanding clothing collection. So I didn't force her to return everything, on the condition that the closet would be mine. I think Julie's plan was to eventually fill both the closet and the closet. Since Julie was the only one who talked to the purchasing agent, I had no idea if the closet had secret compartments. Julie, of course, didn't mention it. But after all, this toilet cost more than it did 200 years ago, and stashes and furniture were in vogue with rich people back then. Ironically, this furniture cost less than its modern counterparts, because someone in the last 50 years had refurbished it. Crazy. I plunged back into the search. Only now, instead of just looking in the drawers, I pulled them out completely. I methodically examined every inch of wood, fingertips groping and pressing at every crevice. I discovered 9 hidden compartments. Some were too small to hold anything but a coin or a folded piece of paper. Others were large enough to hold a book. It was immediately clear that Julie knew about them. If you held the 2 drawers side by side, you would find that one was deeper than the other. Pressing the back left corner revealed a false bottom that held Julie's diploma from Rutgers. She must have a copy at work. Reaching up, I fumbled for a lever in the cavity of the extended center drawer. I fiddled with it until it slid forward, and another hidden drawer dropped into the niche. It held several of Julie's most expensive pieces of jewelry, including a brooch that had once belonged to her great-grandmother. In all, 7 hidden compartments held Julie's belongings. For a moment, I was smug. She must not have found the other 2. But there was no diary. I took another look around the vanity. Found another tiny compartment, empty, but still no diary. I leaned back in my chair and sighed. My gaze stopped at the closet. The matching set. That's where it was. Underneath the raised floor was Julie's diary, as well as some personal papers, birth certificate, social security card, and so on. It was clearly an expensive volume, leather-bound, with the year embossed on the spine. I opened it and saw my wife's almost calligraphic handwriting filling just under half the pages. I was about to start reading but stopped. This diary would certainly give me a deeper insight into Julie's thought process, but it only covered the last 6 months. Where are the volumes for 2015 and earlier? She must have kept previous diaries somewhere. The stash under my suits wasn't big enough. If they were all the same size, they would have filled a large box. Hiding that many books would be difficult. We accumulated a lot of junk, as all married couples do, but we had a huge house that was too big for us. We didn't have a basement or attic full of junk where she could discreetly hide a box full of journals. And inevitably it was me, the husband, who was sent to store or retrieve things from those basements and attics. If they were there, I would see them. I snapped my fingers. Her parents' house. That's the way it should be. Her parents kept Julie and Emma's old bedrooms untouched in case one of their princesses decided to visit. Her old bedroom would be the perfect place to store my wife's old diaries. The time was nearing noon. I looked at the mess I had made in our bedroom. All of the dressing table drawers were strewn across the floor along with their contents. If I had hurried, I would have had time to get things in order and laid out before Julie and Dr. Dick arrived. But why the hell did I have to do that? I left everything as it was. I left Julie's journal on the bed, open at today's date. I took a pencil and wrote cunt on the blank page. That should shock her. I drove to the Bradley house. Julie's father, John, was a vice president of one of the Jersey electric companies. He should be at work. Her mother, Mary, would probably be at church. I don't know why. She was one of those women of advanced years who seemed to go to church every day and made sure to let everyone know about it. What the hell are you doing in church on a Friday afternoon? Gossiping with the other female parishioners, I guess. I saw her messages to my wife, and this supposedly God-fearing lady never said a word to her daughter about the fidelity and sanctity of marriage. So none of the Bradleys were home. If they had a spare key, I didn't know where it was. Searching their yard in broad daylight seemed unwise to me. And I didn't remember them having an alarm system during my visits. There were fogged glass panels on either side of the door. I picked up a decorative ceramic frog on the lawn and threw it at the glass closest to the knob. After that, all that remained was to reach the door to unlock it. The doorway was recessed and partially shaded by shrubbery. Still, assuming someone saw me, I had to act quickly. I didn't want to spend the rest of the day in jail when I could start working on my journals. I headed for Julie's old bedroom. I discounted everything in sight. I'd been there before, so Julie wouldn't have left them in plain sight. She had a pink steamer chest at the foot of her bed, covered with a rolled-up duvet cover. I just knew they were there. I tossed the comforter aside. The chest was locked with a small, heart-shaped lock, the kind parents buy for little girls so they can play secrets. I didn't know if the key was in the room or if Julie carried it with her. But screw it. Subtlety was a thing of the past. I grabbed a trophy from the shelf, girls' volleyball division winner, and started pounding on the lock with the faux marble base. The chest was cheap crap. After 2 blows, the deadbolt broke free, exposing the contents of the chest. Julie's diaries were in there. The earlier ones were inconsistent. Julie must have bought the leather-bound series in 2008, because that's when they became identical. She'd planned it all out ahead of time. There were volumes dating all the way back to 2028. I wasn't interested in Julie's childhood experiences. We met in March 2009, so I grabbed the diaries from that year and got out of there before the police showed up. I'm not going to go into detail about Julie's 7-year-old thoughts and feelings. I'll just outline what I gleaned from a few days of reading. It took me a while to read them. It was an agonizing read. When did Julie start cheating on me? It would be easier to list the times when she didn't cheat. She was faithful for 2 months while we were dating, and didn't cheat for 6 months after we were married. That's it. That's it. Damn it. That's it. For 7 years, Julie cheated on me almost constantly. That explained why I never noticed any difference in her behavior or attitude toward me. I probably wouldn't have noticed anything if she hadn't stopped having fun. She was ashamed of betraying me in the beginning. For the first 2 years, her diary was filled with guilt and recriminations, but the amount of space she gave to self-doubt steadily decreased as it became clear she was getting away with it. After 3 years, she stopped worrying about getting caught. After 5, she was no longer writing about being plagued by remorse. In the last couple years, she wrote about her affairs and conversations with the same emotional weight as a visit to the spa. I didn't know my wife at all. The diary also confirmed that most, if not all, of our friends and family knew that Julie was tooting my horn. Julie recounted many of her daily conversations, especially those concerning her marriage or affairs. Sometimes she would just write what she thought so-and-so knew. The only people she didn't mention were my parents. The worst part was that the diary explained why she was cheating on me. I was a lousy catcher. I couldn't satisfy her in bed. My problem was that I was playing for the pros and my skills were still like a mid-league player. I had too much pride to say, "Hey, honey, I can tell I'm not very good in bed, at least compared to you. Could you teach me?" What young man can admit that he's not satisfying his girlfriend? Similarly, Julie didn't have the courage to tell me that. It was clear from her journal that she was afraid I would break up with her if she said the wrong thing. She didn't want to make me angry or shame me. She knew my shortcomings when she married me. If our sex life was bothering her, she didn't have to say yes. She had options: break up with me, try to help me be a better person, or live with me the way I am. Unfortunately, she chose the whore route. She loved me, she wanted to marry me, but she wanted a more fulfilling life. So she subcontracted to get more entertainment. She started doing this shortly after we started dating. She saw our future on our first date. A few dates later, when we got into a relationship, she was already in love. One thing in her journal that I had to disagree with was Julie's idea of cheating. She believed that as long as a couple didn't announce that they were in an exclusive relationship, they could continue to date other people, which is complete nonsense. I thought the default, at least for anyone with normal morals, was to either date one person at a time or let your partner know they were dating someone else. I thought only assholes used "we never talked about exclusivity" as an excuse to cheat. But that's the prevailing attitude of young people who don't want to be responsible. I just didn't realize Julie held that way of thinking. She seemed so honest and reliable that it never occurred to me. While she accepted my slow courtship, she continued to go out with a couple buddies in her dorm. It wasn't until after a few dates with me that she realized I was taking this seriously. She stopped seeing other guys when our relationship turned physical. She may not have considered what she was doing before that as cheating, but I was sure she did. Had I known how flippant she was about fidelity, our relationship would have ended right then. But according to Julie, her cheating didn't start until 2 months after we first slept together. Julie thought I was a virgin. I must have been that bad. She never brought it up because she thought I might be embarrassed about it. She also didn't want to tell me how many men she'd been with if the subject came up. Not because the number was ridiculously high, but because she could tell my thinking was old-fashioned and didn't want to risk me reacting badly. Since neither of us wanted to talk about the problem, Julie decided to just accept it. She knew my problem was inexperience. She just didn't know that I was a slow learner in this regard. After 2 months, her patience ran out. She went back to her dating. She didn't feel terrible about it at first. I was just a new guy that she really liked. She decided that either I would get better or the relationship would end. But she didn't need to deprive herself of a good life. As the months went by, our relationship got more and more serious, and she felt more and more guilty. If Julie didn't get turned on behind my back, she would have more incentive to confront my shortcomings in bed. The longer we were together, the bigger the elephant in the room became. If she had said something right away, it would have been hard to take. But telling me I was a bad lover got harder the longer she stayed silent. She managed to justify her cheating until we were married. By then, her diary was filled with declarations of love and dreams of our future. She declared that there would be no other men in her bed after we were married. We got married right after graduating from college and started living together. I was gradually getting better, but Julie was disappointed. It took 6 months before she allowed a male nurse she met in college to seduce her. She was deeply ashamed of herself. Cheating on her husband did not fit her idea of herself as an honest person. She was tormented by guilt, but she didn't stop. After each date, she wrote in her diary that it was the last time. Then, she lamented her lack of willpower when she failed again. Eventually, she stopped fighting it. She still said she would stop, but only after practicing it in her marriage improved so much that she no longer needed it. But she still did nothing to improve the situation in the marital bed. She still remained silent. She never said she wasn't satisfied. I knew I needed to get better. But Julie never complained, and frankly, I was getting used to it. There was no need to improve my game. Like I said, it was a year into our marriage before I really picked up my mind and made a serious effort to get better. Not because Julie asked me to, but because I wanted to, myself. By then, Julie had come to terms with my infidelity. She doubted herself less and less. She knew she was getting away with it. Sometimes she even remarked that I was getting better. At first, she said it gave her hope that she could put other men in the past. Then she talked about just cutting back. In the end, she didn't even mention giving up her buddies. By the time I began to meet her criteria of being faithful to me, she seemed to have forgotten that her wanderings were supposed to be temporary. She'd had her cake and eaten it too for so long that she saw no reason to stop. Over the years, she'd been caught several times by coworkers and friends. And each time, they kept her secret, either because they didn't care or because they didn't want to get involved. They acquiesced. Julie had gained the right. She began to openly share her adventures with those closest to her, not me, of course. The only times she felt guilty were special occasions like our anniversary or my birthday. And, ironically, sometimes after we had a steamy session between the sheets. By the time I caught her cheating, Julie's diary had nothing but rave reviews of my skills. The boy had turned into a man. She compared me to almost every lover she'd ever had. But she didn't stop, didn't even think about it. In 3+ years, she never wrote a word about ending it. Aside from the domestic minutiae and scandalous double life, Julie's diary was filled with entries on another subject. How much she loved me. Of all the reasons she gave for loving me, it seemed to me that one was missing. She loved me for being the perfect chump who loved her too much to suspect what a tramp she was. She may not have said it, but deep down she probably thought I was like that. No, her idea of me, at least the one she recognized, was all rainbows and unicorns. You'd think I was one hell of a Prince Charming, unless you only read the G-rated parts of the diary. I consider myself a romantic, but even I had a hard time not getting choked up by her flowery, Samuel Watley-themed sermons. Although I may have wanted to burst into laughter because they sounded like the ramblings of a schizophrenic. She betrays me, destroys my masculinity, kills the respect of my peers. And yet she loves me unconditionally. I always felt like I hit the lottery with Julie. She complimented me perfectly in so many ways. She seemed to love me as much as I loved her. She was almost the perfect wife. Sure, she had her flaws, but nothing that I couldn't live with. And now this. How could so much good live in one body with so much evil? I couldn't figure it out. What I knew for sure was that my marriage was over. Or at least it would be over, if I ever got out of this time loop. My options were severely limited. I couldn't divorce her. I couldn't separate. I couldn't truly get revenge or make her feel my pain. No matter what I did, Julie would wake up every morning thinking she still had a loving husband with the wool thrown over her eyes. But that didn't mean I wasn't going to get a few ounces of flesh, even if I couldn't gain a full pound. I made a few decisions. I'm going to get back at Julie as soon as I can. I don't hit women, but in this case, a lot was left in the balance. I'm going to have a second fight with Dr. Dick. If I don't want to get my ass kicked again, I need to prepare for it. And I'm going to try to figure out how to rebuild my life if and when time starts moving in the right direction again. That's how I spent my day. I did all these things, even though sometimes they led me in a direction I didn't expect. But I was also a broken person. So I went a little crazy for a while. Friday, July 15th, 2016, day 132. Finding out that the woman you love has betrayed you can take a man to a dark place. A daily routine can help mask the pain with ritual. Even so, it can take weeks, months, or even years before you feel whole again. There are many factors that determine how long it takes for a man to truly put a destructive relationship behind him. My circumstances were unique. I'm not sure if I accelerated my recovery process or delayed it. I would call my behavior self-destructive, but that doesn't quite fit. I have come to the conclusion that I am more or less indestructible. My immersion in drugs lasted several months. I won't bore you with the details, even if I could remember most of them. I had many bad reactions to drugs. I couldn't develop a tolerance to anything. I snorted, smoked, and injected all kinds of crap. Half the time, I didn't remember what happened next. I just woke up in the guest room. I suspect I may have overdosed a few times, but I have no way of knowing. I didn't think about it at the time, which doesn't speak to my intelligence. I had a blind spot. The time loop made me feel invulnerable. If I had thought about the real consequences of dying in a time loop, I would have slowed down. Death is final. I had no desire to test that. But when my drug phase was over, I would have definitive proof that I could die and come back. I was looking for adrenochrome. It was in Fear and Loathing, but being square, I thought it was fiction. I Googled it, and it turned out to be real, but I had a hell of a time getting it. I finally came upon a dealer who was supposedly selling this book. I first approached the guy I was taking cocaine from. He didn't remember me, of course, so I had to drop a tab of ecstasy to prove I wasn't a cop, and pay for it. He sent me to a Filipino in Queens who sent me to a dealer named Smoke in Long Island. I thought Smoke was a pretty cute name for a drug dealer. Most of them were just called Bill or Tyrone or whatever. I expected to see a skinny black guy or a white guy with dreadlocks. Smoke turned out to be a 400-pound Jewish woman. So much for my stereotypes. We started doing the dance I was already used to. I looked like what I was, a professional in my early 20s. No one had a problem selling me weed or cocaine, but when I asked for less recreational drugs, they would start scratching their heads. I usually offered to take the drug right on the spot to allay their suspicions. I'd already taken ecstasy for a guy with cocaine, but Smokey wanted to see for himself. I learned not to try smoking anything. Every day I woke up with virgin lungs, and every time I smoked something, I'd get a coughing fit. So I took a few turns, which she provided. When she was convinced I wasn't a cop, she sold me adrenochrome. It was in a small vial that I put in my pocket. I had already turned toward the door when the police busted it open. "Get down! Get down! Everybody on the floor!" By this time, arrest had become a habit for me. I'd been caught buying drugs from undercover cops a few times, but I'd gotten better at recognizing them. I always took the drugs I bought back to the hotel. Some of them made me a little crazy, and a few times hotel managers called the police on me. Plus, I was a little on edge from the ecstasy and speed. So I didn't lay down on the ground like they said. Instead, I reached into my pocket to pull out some adrenochrome. In my drugged brain, I was just reaching for it to hand it over to the police. But they didn't know what I was reaching for. Bang. What was that? I felt weird. I looked down and saw a hole in my shirt. There was no blood at first. I touched it with the tip of my finger. I must have had a very confused look on my face. Then I looked up at the ceiling. There was still no pain. I felt somehow empty. I could hear my rapid breathing, but it felt like it was coming from someone else. The ceiling was shrinking into a point. Friday, July 15th, 2016, day 132. I was dead, without a doubt. If you asked me if I thought I could die and wake up the next day. Given that I've seen how the time loop works, logic would suggest, yes, I would wake up. But I certainly wouldn't test that theory. Well, now I knew. This was the end of my drug binge, not because it was dangerous. I proved to myself that it wasn't while I was on it. No, the death during the raid made me stop and look at what I was doing. I didn't like what I had become. My wife ripped out my heart and shit on my manhood. She made me doubt that any woman could respect me and be happy with me. I tried to brush off my ineptitude in bed as a problem left in the rearview mirror. Yes, I was bad before, but I was better now. I didn't fully believe that. I knew Julie had started cheating to find fulfillment. In the last years of our marriage, she had only spoken positively of me as a lover. But she hadn't stopped cheating. So was I still not good enough to keep a woman from cheating? I ran away. From now on, I'll be in the business of rebuilding the man Julie destroyed. Friday, July 15th, 2016, day 133. I knew where to start. I went to work. Even on the days when I was an addict, I continued to perfect my day trading formula. I didn't need the money yet, but when you can make millions of dollars. As I honed my trades, the number of trades grew. Eventually, I had memorized all the significant stock movements for July 15th, 2016, and could pre-book my trades in less than 30 minutes. I hit the road, but I had another reason to come to Broadwell and Marks that day. I went to the office of my boss, Ben Johnson. Ben was a playboy. He had a whole bunch of women he dated regularly, but he was honest about it. The woman who dated him knew he hung around. They tolerated him because they hoped to win the golden ticket and become Mrs. Johnson, the wife of a young Wall Street businessman. Ben was used to getting pleasure early and often, and I knew that sometimes he dispensed with the middlemen and just paid for it. I knocked on his door and walked in. "Hey, Ben, do you have a minute?" "Sure, Sam. What do you need?" "It's not business related. I was in the break room the other day and heard you and Schmidt talking about finding Brad a bachelor party escort." Ben looked puzzled. "Yes, I remember. Not the conversation itself, but we bought Brad some company. Listen, Sam, I'm sorry I didn't invite you to the party, but it's not like you'd— No, that's not what I'm getting at. You're right, it's not really my scene. In fact, I was hoping you could clue me in on an escort. Someone high class," Ben hissed. "What makes you think that, Sam? You practically have happily married tattooed on your forehead." I was flabbergasted. I didn't really feel like talking about my marriage problems. You know what? Forget I asked about it. It's none of my business, sorry. How much do you want to spend? The sky's the limit, but I need someone very professional. I need brains and beauty. No airheads. Then I know the perfect woman, but I must warn you she's very expensive. 5 grand minimum. If you want to spend the night with her, 15. Gloria is the best, but I can set you up with the perfect woman for a grand or two. No, I said. If Gloria is the best, she's the one I want. I can do that. Ben didn't hesitate. He probably knew how much I had in my personal trading account, but he was a man. He wouldn't question my ability to pay. I went to him because I knew he would mind his own business and just set me up. I could have gone to any one of a dozen executives at Broadwell and Marks. Some people on Wall Street kept Rolodexes of prostitutes and strippers right on their desks. If not for themselves, then to butter up VIPs. Gloria only works by referral, so I can't give you her number. I'll call her and give her your cell number. She'll set up an appointment. Thank you, Ben. I appreciate it. No problem, Sam. I know you're a reliable guy. I wouldn't set anyone up with Gloria. She might blow me off. He might have been busting my ass, but I doubted it. I had a reputation for honesty. That didn't exactly go along with going to a prostitute, but I definitely wasn't someone who would abuse it. I didn't have anything else to say, so I thanked him again and walked out. Now I had a new dilemma in front of me. I had work to do. I didn't want to anger Ben by taking time off work and possibly ruin the connection he was organizing for me. Oh well, it wasn't the end of the world. In fact, it had been so long since I'd worked on Broadwell and Marks all day that I'd forgotten most of the research I'd done in those first few days. Around 3 in the afternoon, the phone rang. It was an unlisted number. Hello, Sam Waltley speaking. Hello, Sam. A friend gave me your number. You must be Gloria. I'm very glad to hear from you. Mr. Johnson said you might be looking for a date. Do you have an event coming up? She was cautious. She wasn't going to give details over the phone. Besides, high-class call girls like her dealt with a lot of corporate types who liked to show them off. Something like that. I'm actually a little short on time. If you're free, I'd like to meet and discuss the details. You're in luck. I have a canceled appointment. I can meet you at La Chiffre at the Westin Times Square. Would 8 o'clock work for you? That would be perfect, I replied. I look forward to meeting you. I continued to work and worked the whole day. I usually turned my phone off in the evenings because Julie would call when I didn't get home. But sometimes, like tonight, I thought I might need to make or receive a call, so I just set her ringtone to silent. Tonight I would need cash, so I headed to the 24-hour branch of my bank. Given that I had advanced knowledge of the stock market fluctuations that day, turning my startup capital into a small fortune was easy. What was much more difficult was accessing that money. Banks are wary of receiving and dispersing funds on the same day. If I lived in a small town with a less developed financial sector, I wouldn't have been able to get most of my money. Fortunately, I worked for a brokerage firm with several $billion in assets, and my bank was owned by one of our close corporate allies. Broadwell and Marks moved so much money through the bank that any account marked as part of their umbrella received VIP treatment. Even as my account grew to several million, I was still a relative minnow. I could withdraw a few $100,000 in cash without raising an alarm. If I needed more, I had a bank credit card with a limit tied to the account balance. As of tonight, I had withdrawn $50,000. I went to the Westin in advance. I got the best room they had available. I didn't have time for a new suit, but I asked the concierge to buy me a new shirt and tie and build the room. They were waiting for me when I got out of the shower. I was nervous and didn't want to sweat in a suit, so I lay around in my hotel robe until it was time for my meeting with Gloria. I got to the restaurant 15 minutes early and sat at the bar. Gloria didn't say if we were having dinner, so I gave my name to the maitre d' just in case. A text from Gloria came in just before 8. Gloria. Almost there. I'm wearing a green dress with a silver pattern. As soon as I looked up from my phone, I saw her. Wow. Julie was a beautiful woman, but Gloria was a whole different class. The two guys sitting next to me at the bar literally stopped their conversation halfway through. Truth be told, Julie was more my type. I like petite women, and Julie was 5'6" and about 120 pounds. Gloria was taller by about 5 inches. Her conservative heels were 2 inches below my height. She moved with a graceful grace that made me think she had dance training. Her bust was perfectly shaped and her ass looked like it could be pushed off with a quarter. But the main attraction was her face. She had the same brown hair and green eyes as my wife. But if Julie was good-looking, Gloria was radiant. She could give Helen of Troy a head start. I probably had the same thought as every one of her clients. Why is this woman selling her body? She could have been a model or an actress. I never asked her. It seemed impolite. I approached her. Gloria, hi, I'm Sam. She held out her hand to shake mine. Nice to meet you, Sam. Instead of shaking it, I took her hand and kissed the back of it. It seemed like the right thing to do. She smiled slightly, as if I'd done something nice. Quite the gentleman, she said. I blushed. I apologize. I wasn't prepared for your beauty. It seemed appropriate to me. I thought she might blush, but dismissed the thought. This woman did courtship for a living. Must I put my name on the waiting list if you want to eat? Perhaps, she replied. Let's go to the bar and talk for a while. I'm not the best conversationalist. With Gloria, it didn't matter. She kept the conversation flowing easily, and I felt completely at ease with this beautiful woman. I understood why she could charge for her companionship. She was energetic. After we talked for a while, she touched on the reason for our arrival. I got the impression that you're not exactly a regular customer. I can see that. You haven't taken your eyes off me since we sat down at the table. She leaned over and whispered in my ear. I don't mind you looking. You'll see everything tonight. I'm sorry. There's a story behind it. When I was younger, I was shy. I didn't make eye contact with people. I had a reputation among the girls at school because I would lower my eyes when I talked to them. I had to make an effort on myself to look people, especially women, in the eye so they wouldn't think I was a creep. No need to apologize, she laughed. Most of the time I appreciate not being ogled. Let's have dinner. But I think we should continue this conversation in private. Why don't you get a room and we could order something? Actually, I already have a room. I wanted to take a shower after work. We can go when you're ready. I paid for our drinks as we got them. I threw a tip on the bar and we left the restaurant. We ordered food from room service and ate it at the table in my room. We continued to talk about general topics until we finished eating. I made a conscious effort on myself and didn't let my eyes wander. When a woman makes it clear she wants you to pay attention to her, it's best to look if you don't want to offend her. It seems we've come to the entertainment portion of the evening. Excuse me, but we have some business to discuss first, Gloria said. We discussed prices for another minute before I told her what I wanted to accomplish tonight. I don't have a problem with the price, but I do have a special request. Nothing kinky, just unusual. I want you to criticize me. Criticize you? Asked Gloria, confused. Most men are looking for fantasy, not judgment. I recently experienced a blow to my ego, I said. I paused, trying to find the words. There's no point in talking about it. My wife cheated on me because I didn't satisfy her. I don't want to go into details. I'll just say that I've solved the problem and I want an unbiased opinion. She looked concerned. I'm sorry you had to go through that. It must have been very painful for you to hear that. I wouldn't want to add to your problems. My business is a pleasure, and I'm good at it. If I tell half my customers where they could improve, it could lead to trouble. I went and pulled out a bank bag, which I put in my bedside dresser. From the bank, I pulled out 3 wads of bills wrapped in tape. And here's 30,000. It's yours no matter what happens from here on out. I promise I won't be angry no matter what you say to me later. I don't expect you to tell me I'm Don Juan. In fact, the only thing you might disappoint me with is to grin at me and say something blatantly false. Even so, I won't get angry. I'll just mind my own business elsewhere. I'll keep you posted. Give me a minute to freshen up. Gloria retired to the bathroom. I went around and turned off almost all the lights, leaving enough to see without being too bright. Taking off my shoes and tie, I sat down on the bed. I questioned whether I could sleep with anyone but my wife. I didn't want to be hypocritical, but in my mind, the marriage was already over. Now, Julie had betrayed me so thoroughly that I knew I could never live with myself if I stayed with her. Even if I could forgive her, I would have to bury my self-respect. I had loved Julie for most of my adult life. For her sake, I was willing to take a bullet, but not from her. No, no. My musings were interrupted by the light from the bathroom door opening, and then my thoughts faded. Friday, July 15th, 2016, day 133. The dream with Gloria had put an end to my marriage to Julie. Although I couldn't divorce her while I was in the time loop of sleeping with another woman, it was over for me. I continued to live my life. Being trapped living the same day over and over again is kind of like purgatory. In fact, I seriously considered the theological implications of my situation. I didn't believe I was actually in heaven or hell, but my life could resemble either of them if I let it. So, what's a guy to do with eternity? I've watched soap operas. I ate at every restaurant I showed even a passing interest in, as well as several hundred I didn't. I've seen every movie, play, and musical around New York City. Went to every museum, landmark, and tourist attraction. I used my newfound wealth to get into places I couldn't afford before. I spent like it was going out of style. I gave away thousands to people on the streets. I tipped servers exorbitantly. I went to expensive boutiques and asked them to pamper me. I went to strip clubs and rained $100 bills on myself. I was easily bored, so I did a lot of stupid things. It was liberating to know that I could do pretty much anything I wanted without repercussions. I honed my technique with a garden hose. The Chinese have their water torture, I have mine. On my first attempt, Dr. Peters kicked my ass again, though not as hard as the first time. This brought me to one of the goals I had set for myself. I needed to learn how to fight. I'm a big guy. Being 4 inches taller than the average man, and even broad in the shoulders, I'm used to being one of the biggest guys in the room, especially among my fellow white-collar fellows. That's why I never had to fight. I was too big to be bullied and too soft to do it. But I subconsciously believed that if it came to a fight, I could fight. Like I suspect many men, I considered myself an untapped powder keg of tough guy toughness. I just preferred not to get my ass kicked. But Dr. Dick had disabused me of that notion, and now I wanted to correct that imbalance. I wanted to beat him in a fair fight, and for that, I needed training. In a city the size of New York, you can find anything. I had no shortage of martial arts training centers to choose from and unlimited funds to get hands-on training. My first choice was Krav Maga. I had heard that it was perhaps the most practical of fighting styles, designed for real-life situations. MMA training was easier to find, but I didn't want to do much grappling, especially with Dr. Dick. I was worried that I wouldn't be able to learn. I was already in good shape, but I couldn't build muscle memory. But I tried anyway. And either muscle memory is total crap, or it has more to do with the brain than the muscles themselves, because I had no problem continuing to work out from where I left off every day. For a while, combat training became my main job. I devoted several hours every day to it. I would train at one school for a few months, then move on to another to try their style. After I was able to stand up to advanced students in a fight, I would move on to another school again. I didn't need to be an expert, just having the skills was enough. I discovered things I didn't expect. I loved it. I had been a regular at the gym for years, but I liked the more precise workout. It was sweat with benefits. The forms to improve balance and coordination were almost meditative. And yes, I admit that I enjoyed the fights themselves, though perhaps my enjoyment was aided by the fact that I was never sore or bruised the next day. Krav Maga is a fusion of more traditional fighting styles, just without the unnecessary movements and postures. Since I enjoyed it so much, the art of combat, I decided to check out the traditional schools. I visited a few, but ended up giving up on them quickly. All of the instructors wanted to fix me. They emphasized tradition, and although I liked the almost yogic stances and movements, when it came time to spar, I reverted to the simpler Krav Maga movements. I even tried yoga for a couple days, but after you're done with all that stretching, they don't let you hit each other. That sucks. But it inspired me to ask Ben if he knows a girl who likes light spanking. I met Cassie at the Westin Hotel with several pairs of yoga pants. Awesome. I was about to give up on other fighting styles when I walked into a small Hapkido dojo above a Korean restaurant in the Bronx. When I first met Sung, the owner, I immediately felt a kinship. It was strange. If he had been a woman, I might have likened it to meeting a soulmate. But no way, I'm completely natural. It was very strange. Sleep was a taciturn man. I was never able to form a real friendship with him. He was too reserved for me to become attached to him overnight. As I got to know him better, I was able to shorten the getting to know him period and learn some of his background. But even in spite of the almost compulsion I felt for him, I had to accept that we would never have a true two-way friendship until the time loop was over. As for that strange, attraction, to say the least, I chalked it up to the fact that we were soulmates when it came to martial arts. Kenji had some sort of martial arts background. He taught traditional forms and kata, but adapted them for practical application and mixed in other styles where they were more effective. An unfortunate manifestation of the time loop effect caused me to consider Kenji my best friend, while to him I was just a stranger he met for the first time every day. His dojo became my home away from home, a backup where I went when I couldn't muster the enthusiasm to come up with something new. I kept practicing martial arts. After a while, it stopped being a means to an end and became a reward in its own right. But I was still going to kick Dr. Dick's ass. The end of part 1. The second part of this story is already on my channel. The link is in the description or in the comments.